Hello, welcome to another IELTS essay writing video. In today's lesson, we're looking at an essay, and in each of the essay's sentences, there is a mistake. And it is your job to identify the mistake. The mistake could be related to spelling, it could be related to the tone of the sentence and how that tone fits or does not fit with the rest of the essay. It could be a grammar issue. So I hope this lesson is challenging. If you find today's video helpful, please visit my blog at IELTS.com. And today's essay question comes to us from IELTSblog.com, so please also visit Simone's resources there. Now, before we get to the essay question and the essay itself, I just want to run through a quick example question to show you how today's lesson is going to work. So here's an example sentence. The brevity of the meeting left him with dissatisfied. And what you need to do is identify where the mistake is in this sentence. And of course, the mistake is the word with. We do not need to couple dissatisfied with the preposition with. We can just simply say the brevity of the meeting left him dissatisfied. Okay. Now let's look at the question. The question appeared this week on the academic exam in the UK. And the date today is the 16th, I believe. Yes, December 16th. So this was an essay question from a few days ago on the UK exam, academic exam. Should education and healthcare be free of charge and funded by the government, or should it be the responsibility of the people to pay for these services? Okay, very straightforward question. Okay, now let's get to the essay response. Again, I will pause after each sentence, give you a few seconds, and you can try to identify the mistake that appears in that sentence. History and human development have proven that education and healthcare are fundamental human right and should not be restricted to anyone regardless of financial status. Okay, the issue here is, of course, right, which should be rights. So we have are, we're talking about education and healthcare, and these two things together are fundamental human rights, or should be. Thus, it is argued that the funding of education and basic healthcare are responsibilities that should be borne by a country's government. Okay, now often these sorts of sentences can be confusing for students because we have the phrase here, the funding of education and basic health care, which might make you think that this verb here, to be, is referring to education and basic health care, but it's not. It's referring to the funding, which is singular. So this should become is, and this should become a responsibility. Okay, so if you spotted that, good for you. Thus, it is argued that the funding of education and basic healthcare is a responsibility that should be borne by a country's government. And as we go through these essays, please remember that if words like born are new, you should be noting them in your personal dictionary. This will be proven by looking at how such an arrangement leads societies to higher standards of living, which in turn leads to greater degrees of productivity per capita. Okay, I believe this is probably one of the easier questions, in today's lesson. Of course, societies, we're not talking about the possessive here. This should be societies, plural. Leads societies to higher standards of living, which in turn leads to greater degrees of productivity per capita. Okay, on to the first supporting paragraph. Firstly, when the people of the society do not need to worry about paying for education and healthcare, they have greater freedom to develop as human beings. Okay, now this is a mistake that I see all the time. If we're talking sort of generally about society, we're not talking about a society in particular, so we're not talking about, for example, Canadian society or European society or something specific, then using the word "the" is awkward, because "the" indicates something that has been referred to before, or so when the writer uses the word "the," it sort of denotes to the reader something that the reader already knows. But in this case, we don't really know which society in particular the writer is talking about. So this would be better worded as "a." Okay, so firstly, when the people of a society do not need to worry about paying for education and healthcare, they have greater freedom to develop as human beings. Now, we need to support this claim with evidence. For example, the Human Development Index is a chart that compares countries based on their citizens' life expectancy, level of education, and income expectancy. Okay, and now countries don't have one citizen, they have citizens. So this should be worded this way. It is no surprise that countries providing free healthcare and education, such as Sweden and Australia, consistently have higher HDI levels than countries that do not provide these services. Okay, easy one here. We are comparing, so this should be than. Thus, academia and medical support should be provided for governments. And we're not saying that these things should be provided to governments, we're saying that the governments should provide it to the people, so this should be provided by. Okay, good job so far. Let's continue on to the second supporting paragraph. In addition to the above, it appears that when a society's concern for personal well-being is lesser, the productivity of its people increases. All right, and here we're using the comparative, which would be incorrect. What we want to do is say lessened. So in addition to the above, it appears that when a society's concern for personal well-being is lessened, the productivity of its people increases. For instance, gross domestic product per capita values appear to move in tandem to HDI values. Okay, and we wouldn't say in tandem to HDI values, we'd say in tandem with HDI values. Thus, the tie between longer life expectancy, education, and GDP can be seen, therefore. And and here therefore is very out of place. We already have thus, so we don't need to write it here. It therefore is clear that governments capable of providing educational and healthcare resources for their societies encourage a positive growth. Okay, and here we would take out this article a. Encourage a positive growth. No, it's just generally, they just encourage positive growth as a whole. As the above discussion shows, countries are sometimes benefited when governments take on the burden of education and medical expenses. Okay, and in this question, the issue is the word sometimes. Sometimes, well, firstly, in this sentence, we're trying to restate our thesis, which we want to state with strength. And when we use words like sometimes and could be, maybe, these words are not strong words. These words make you sound like you do not truly believe in what you're saying. And when you do that, it makes it difficult for the reader to agree with you. And when the reader doesn't agree with you, then it's obviously not going to help your task achievement mark. So particularly in moments when you're trying to state something with strength, avoid words that are sort of in the middle or kind of wishy-washy. So I'm going to change that to most. Or you could have just taken it out completely and said are benefited. That's fine too. But the word sometimes is not what we're looking for in the essay. It is therefore hoped that all countries around my world strive to provide such an arrangement. Okay, I'll get this sentence onto a page so you can... Okay, the error here is the word my. So technically this is a grammatically correct sentence, but we've spent the entire essay writing passively. We have not used any personal pronouns to refer to ourselves and our opinions. So when we use words like my, it just devalues the level of academic language in the piece. So it makes the essay sound more like it was written by a middle school student versus a university student. So that's why I like to encourage students to avoid these sorts of personal pronouns if they can. I mean, sometimes you can't because the essay question might ask you for personal examples. So that's fine if the question asks you specifically for those. But otherwise, try to avoid this kind of language because, for one, it will help you to sound much more academic. And secondly, it creates a bit of unity throughout the entire essay. So for example, here, I mean, we spent the whole essay not using this kind of language, and then the very last sentence I used the word my. It doesn't really match the rest of the essay. We want to exhibit parallelism throughout the essay. So this is not correct. I would change this to the world. Okay. So I hope that lesson was helpful. As always, please provide me some feedback. Let me know, what you liked about the lesson, how it could be changed, what you want to see in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and have a nice evening.